for your leadership teams together to sit and have discussions about it, that to think about and just become more aware and consider alternatives, be willing to experiment. So I think the articles can just be impetus to create discussion, which is why I offer it today. So that's, I think we'll go on to our next. We have the people joining us. We're just seeding the conversation with a couple of different ideas about what we might do. We'll look forward to hearing your ideas.
Would you like me to share the Paul Marciano view?
Sure, this isn't very long, and this is a small video that has some additional perspective that we can take into the discussion today.
Peter, I don't know if it's just me, but I can't hear what the person is saying, yeah?
Relationship review.
Yeah, no, I can't hear anything either, just looking at the slide.
Okay, I think maybe the sound's not coming through. So let's skip that and go on to the input. So
Yeah.
I'll hand back to you, Cheryl.
Yeah, we can send the link out.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So our first guest
is Ashish Chawla.
Okay, so you go ahead and introduce him, and then I'll introduce Kate.
Okay, so we're going to get a perspective on this, and there isn't a right or a wrong answer, and there's various ways to do it. So we invited a couple of people that we've been working with over the last few years to give an input. So the first of those is Ashish Chawla, who is the head of HR of ST Microelectronics in India. So maybe you'd like to introduce yourself and share some of your thoughts on this, Ashish.
So I'll just share my screen first, if yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Is my screen visible by any chance?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. I'll try to be brief. Okay. I'm, as you've already heard from Peter, I'm heading HR for India for ST Microelectronics, and we've been obviously, as Cheryl mentioned, also having a lot of challenges with the performance management system, and we've realized that the objectives that we are setting for our people haven't been really yielding the results that we wanted. The trigger, of course, for us was the fact that a lot of our objectives didn't really meet the goals of the organization. So we realized that we were measuring the wrong things, first of all. And this led us to a lot of introspection. And of course, by chance, we came across this very interesting case. I'm just going to jump into the example here, the processionary caterpillars. And I'll be very brief about this example, but just to share, this was an experiment done by a French naturalist in the early 90s and 1900s. And he basically just put some caterpillars together, and these are called processionary caterpillars. And what he did was, these normally caterpillars go in a procession, and they one after the other, and they join together in the sense that one is at the backside of the other, and they move together. And they can go as long as 300, and it's actually a survival technique, because then they look like a serpent, and they actually avoid predators. So the idea behind this was that he did this experiment. He put them in a pot, and he put the front of the caterpillar onto the back of another. And they became, of course, then they started to look something like a circle, and they started moving around. And they couldn't find any food. And so he put food just a few centimeters away from them, and they just couldn't, they just kept going round and round and round. And what happened was they actually ended up dying of starvation. Seems like a gory story, but I just wanted to drive home a point here. And this is a realization that we had ourselves as well. The fact was, we oftentimes mistake motion for meaning or activity for accomplishment. And what we do is we are pretty busy doing stuff that we feel is really counting for something, but actually we are not very clear about it. And that's how we actually came across a concept called ROMA, results-oriented management by accountability. And what we realized was we were managing things in the wrong way. And a lot of things that we were measuring as performance was actually not performance. Those were activities and leading to results which weren't the desired results because the focus was itself wrong. And this was a very interesting discovery for us because we thought we were doing the right things initially. So modern day management requires us to look beyond activities and outputs to focus on results, actual results. And what is result? And seemingly very simple concept, but believe me, when we look inside it, it's pretty deep. It's something which is a measurable change in state that is derived from a cause and effect relationship. Most organizations aren't really focusing on the cause and effect relationship. And what we end up doing is having objectives for our people, and this is what gets measured and what Cheryl was mentioning, we end up rewarding or not rewarding. And the fact is that what we are rewarding many a times is an activity rather than a result. And this is something that we found through a lot of evaluation of our performance management system. The objectives were not very clear to people. The purpose of the objective was not very clear to people. And they didn't have something which is called line of sight. They didn't have a line of sight to the purpose. And the lower in the hierarchy you were, the line of sight was that much distant. And you were just focusing on the activity without really knowing the purpose. So what we also realized is to create a high performance organization, we needed to have goal setting which was outcome based. And this word has become a mantra in our organization today. Most of the organizations are output based rather than outcome based. So the performance management system is looking at short-term gains rather than medium to long-term gains. What is the impact of what we are doing is not getting measured in the right way. And in fact, it is not even being put in the objective in the correct way. We talk about smart objectives, but believe me, what we are measuring in those smart objectives is actually not very smart. We are missing out on something which is very important, is on the overall understanding of why that particular thing is happening. And I just shared what was the trigger for us. We had people of employees having loosely defined objectives, and wherever objectives were defined, the outcomes weren't always clear. And we had multiple non-smart objectives, and activities and tasks were confused as objectives. So normally what happens is when a project is getting launched, there is a gap, right? Where we are and where we need to be. And normally what happens is every organization is having a lot of inputs, but we always are wondering why there are so many inputs, but where are the results that we desire? And they're not there to be seen. So this is happening through what we put as the bridge, and somehow it's uncannily resembling the bridge that Peter shared. It's the performance management excellence. And of course, there are obstacles on the way. The crocodiles, the alligators are sharing that particular element there. But the fact is, to cross this particular bridge is the most important one. And how we construct this bridge is taking us to the right destination. This is from Bersin, and we adopted this model, of course, and we realized that we were thinking that we were at the top level, but we weren't. And our target, of course, was to reach out performance management, which drives results rather than anything else. And we started to work towards this particular goal in a very, very concerted manner. So what Roma does is it focuses the shift from what we are doing to what we are achieving. And a lot of activities happen, but what are these activities leading to? So many a times we are starting with the activity and moving to the result. Whereas we should actually start with the result, where what we want to, the purpose, the longer term, medium term purpose, and then sort of grade the activities accordingly across the hierarchy. And every person in the hierarchy must know what his or her role is in getting that result. So Seemingly very simple, but believe me, again, not very easy to implement. So we are looking at inputs, we are looking at activities, which is the how part, and what we want, output, outcomes, and of course, the impact is why we want that particular element. The previous focus has been, in many organizations, has been on limited to outputs. The newer focus is where outcomes are. And this also takes me to the question that was asked by somebody in the chat box. One of the biggest way to engage people is to share the outcomes with them, not tell them to reach the outputs. The moment you tell them the outcomes that are desired from the work that they do, whatever level they might be, that's one way which helps people feel a little bit more engaged and in many cases even fulfilled. And of course, that does not mean you remove the focus at the lower levels. You need to have the focus at the lower levels, but it's a broader focus. And each level has to have indicators. And this is what we're talking about, the line of sight. So you actually have a line of sight to the top, from the bottom hierarchy till the very top. Important element here. So when making a plan or reporting a progress, we are challenged like never before to describe the connection between the work we do and the difference we make. The difference that we make is the impact, which is very similar to the outcome-based thing. So this is the most important part of what I want to share. And this is, we have this two-box thing, which is quantity and quality. How much do we do and how well do we do it? Then we have another axis, which is the effort and effect. How hard did we try? And effect is how is anyone better off because of that? You will find when we combine these two axes together, most of the goals that we have in our careers and even in organizations is on the top two boxes, where a better performance management system. So just to give you what these would entail, and these are the types of performance measures that we need to have for each of these quadrants that we just mentioned. And there are questions which we can have, which are the accountability questions, which gets us to the lower quadrants as well. I'm not going to focus on these questions, but just to share, these questions are there, which we need to ask ourselves, which will take us to the purpose and therefore will take us to the effect rather than the effort. So we start with results, determine indicators, define explicit targets, and collect information, monitor, and review analysis. And this leads to, believe me, the best performance management system that you'll have. And it will also lead you to people who are making an impact and how we can reward them better. So just to end on a philosophical quote, which is not very philosophical, by the way, destiny is not a matter of chance, it's a matter of choice. It's a thing not to be waited for, it's a thing to be achieved. And that can be achieved through the effect or the impact that we make. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheesh. Are these slides going to be available then to send out to people?
Sure, I can, definitely.
Yeah, that would be amazing. There was a lot in there. Even I found myself, I couldn't keep up to take notes. It would be great to have the slides. Thank you for
sure,
that.
Definitely.
So next we have Kate Gribaldi. So let's shift. You want to, I guess, stop sharing your screen? Where are you, Kate? There you are. Hi, Kate.
Hi, how are you?
Yeah, so I first came across, so I had some business dealings with Paylocity. It was interesting. I was talking to one of the employees about a topic and they mentioned how great the feedback process was. So I found myself investigating it. That got me to Kate. She's here just to share some top line, some of the innovation that they've done and what the results have been. So thank you, Kate. With that, I'll turn it over to you.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me. Let me go ahead and share this here. I just have a couple of slides, I think make it a little bit easier. So start by saying I'm Kate Grimaldi. I'm the Director of Strategic Talent Programs, as well as Internal Communications and HRBP teams here at Paylocity. My responsibility is really about that talent program piece. So what we're talking about today, how do we really get the talent management to where it needs to be? I was listening to what Cheryl was saying earlier, and Ashish, some of the things that you were saying, and I couldn't help but thinking that Peter and Cheryl really figured out how to put the right people together, because this is exactly kind of the next step is that I'm looking at. I really latched onto that bridge piece that Peter was talking about earlier. And really at Paylocity, what we really think about from that bridge piece is sort of this turn by turn approach to managing performance. And so when we think about feedback, one of the things that I kept going back to, and it was what Cheryl was saying, which is somebody puts their heart and soul into their job and they get to that annual review and they're told, yep, you're doing exactly what we wanted. Thanks. Have a great day. And they're left feeling disengaged. They're left feeling like, what else could I have done I didn't know? And so I started digging into this, and I spent a lot of time doing a lot of research, a lot of focus groups. And what I found, at least where we were struggling, is we are a high growth technology company. We move incredibly fast. And to what Ashish said, sometimes we were just focused on the activities. It was just get it done, get every single activity done. And we weren't actually focused on, were people doing the activities in the right way? Were we getting the benefit out of them? So we started talking a little bit more, and I really sort of worked on this, what we would call a GPS approach. So when we were allowed to go places, depending on where you live, you'd get in your car and you'd plug in your destination into your GPS, and your GPS would tell you, turn right, turn left. Your GPS wouldn't wait for you to get 2 miles, 2 kilometers out of the way to then say, turn around, you're going the wrong way. They'll tell you in the moment. It's the same way with giving feedback to people. They don't want to wait until the end of the year or the end of the cycle to hear, I wish you would have done that differently. I wish you would have responded. I wish that project would have been handled in a different way. They need to know in the moment. So by taking that turn by turn approach, you're having those consistent conversations. And that could be through any way you want, whether it's something as simple as you're having a conversation, you send a follow-up email, you're documenting it somewhere, and maybe you're not. Maybe you're just having the conversation. It's bite-sized pieces of feedback in the moment. It allows people to redirect, as the GPS would if you're going the wrong way, to keep going. If you do document those conversations and you do some sort of review at the end of the year or the end of the cycle, whatever you're using, that's already written for you because you've already given that feedback. And hopefully that person who has put their heart and soul feels that they've gotten that feedback as to what they're doing and what they've needed to change. So when you have that conversation that says you met expectations or you were average this year, they're not surprised. A big part of what we found was that people felt surprised. We were moving so quickly and they said, but I was checking everything off the list that you gave me. How did I not do a great job? I checked everything off. And then we had leaders saying, well, but you didn't do it exact right way I would have wanted. And so I started asking those leaders, well, when are you telling them? Well, I'm telling them at the end of the year. And it doesn't seem like rocket science, I know, but really taking that approach of telling them in the moment and then putting it somewhere that you can reference it later to say, hey, do you remember when we had this project and I gave you this feedback? You either took the advice that I gave you or you didn't. And this is kind of where we ended up. So, that's kind of what I'm really showing you on this slide is the clearer the destination, the easier it is to determine what you need to get there. And so I think that fits in nicely what we've been talking about is focus on where you want to be, focus on what the result is. Give that feedback timely and frequently. Find a way to document that, put it down somewhere more so you don't forget. I'm the queen of Post-it notes because I forget everything. And so for me, a lot of times it's making sure that I haven't forgotten what I've told someone. And then consider using that sort of real-time rerouting support, just like a GPS. You are the GPS for the people that work for you, for your leaders, rerouting them as they go, and then capturing those discussions. What that really ends up looking like is this really great roadmap, which is making sure that you are checking in on each one of these things. And I'm sure we all call these things differently, meeting recaps, career check-ins. But the idea is each of these checkpoints, as you're talking with people, they know what to expect. They don't feel as though they are surprised. They don't feel as though they were headed in the wrong direction and you let them get so far down the path. I'm sure we can all think of a time where someone let us get really waist deep into a project and then they said, that's exactly not all what I wanted. And you're left feeling like I spent all this time and energy working on this and now you're telling me it's completely wrong. It's the same way for those frontline people and even the activities. They want to know that they're headed in the right direction. So what we have found is really just sort of taking that turn by turn approach, really looking at ourselves as GPS and making sure that we are sort of kind of moving people around as they're going. The other piece is, our company is about 4,000 people. Each one of our sort of business units does things a little bit differently. And at first I thought that was actually a hindrance, but what I